protagonist, the leading character or one of the major characters in a drama, movie, novel, or other fictional text. The main figure or one of the most prominent figures in a real situation. This is the definition of a protagonist. This is the character you follow, the character you experience ups and downs with, the character you are likely to encourage to see their goals to the end. Patlabor isn't exactly too different, with its main central character being Noa Izumi, a Special Vehicle Section 2 Division 2. However, protagonist is a bit of a strong word for a character like Noa. Yes, she is indeed the poster girl of the franchise, and one of the first people you may think of when you hear Patlabor, but Patlabor follows more of an ensemble approach to its story. Yes, Noa is mostly the central character in a lot of the more notable conflicts in the story, but outside of that, the franchise doesn't shy away from humanizing what would be its supporting cast. In a way, all of Division 2 are main characters, all with their goals, beliefs, struggles, and character arcs. You can't tell the same story of Patlabor if one of them was absent from the story completely. But we're not here to talk about them today. We're here to talk about Noa. As stated before, Noa is the central character to Patlabor, the poster girl, and the icon of the franchise. However, despite this, I don't believe her to be a character many show interest in. But let me clarify. She's a peppy, short-haired tomboy girl who loves robots, and there is a large audience for that type of character, who she and which is very popular in. But for the moment, let's take a look beyond that. How many people take the opportunity to go, what is Noa, or why is Noa? This is a question that was difficult for even a couple members of Headgear to answer, and it wasn't exactly because Noa is a complex character with layers. I feel like it's the exact opposite. Noa is straightforward. Her goals are simple and easy to understand. It's easier to explain who Noa is than to really go into the depth of her character. For example, let's compare her to her partner Asuma, who is her backup and commands her from the sidelines. Asuma is one of Patlabor's more deeper characters, whose background in regards to his family, father, and social life tie into who he is and why he does the thing he does. He's rude because he's put into the situation because of his father. Argumentative and brash, likely due to that being the most effective mode of communication growing up, and him and his father speaking their minds without filter. Yet on the field, he is extremely competent at his job. Unsurprising considering his father and his grandfather held down positions where they had to lead the family company to success. This also tells us where he gets his intelligence from, having a background in technology too. This just scratches the surface, but there are many things you can take away from Asuma's character upon looking deeper into who he is. Back to Noa, if you look at her past, you can infer a couple things. She lived an ordinary life with a pretty good support system. She had many adults in her life she could look up to, in both family and academics. She was actively participating in sports, being on the softball team and eventually basketball, though after her first game she washed out. As a child, she also cherished a dog named Alphonse that would pass away while she was still very young herself, and she'd mourn the death of Alphonse for a greater part of her life up until the events of Patlabor take place. She also had a cat named Alphonse and would then name the Ingram itself Alphonse. This is where Noa's past begins to tie into the present and future, and one of the main themes of Patlabor: youth. Youth is a fleeting privilege. The worries of Noa and her friends are a path they will walk someday, yet also a path they have already traveled. They teach us the courage to face the future without fear, and the wisdom to use memories as nourishment rather than dwelling on. Don't have any regrets. Make your own decisions. Give it your all. That is what it means for them to live in the present. As stated by Masami Yuki, Noa starts out with an immense love for labors, though as the story goes on, she learns to grow into an adult. This is in reference to the manga, but I believe the characters share development throughout each entry regardless of what continuity it ascertains to. If this wasn't the case, then the context of the characters and where they end up when you jump from the first film to the second would leave the viewer with a lot of questions. Other mecha anime have younger characters, often put at odds against adults, the future being in the hands of the youth. Noa is a character who eventually comes to terms with her past as she enters adulthood. Numerous times does she encounter people who are just like her, often seeing her as a role model, someone they can follow in her footsteps. Noa has already shared this idea with Asuma, relaying that this is the kind of person that she'd like to be. Even then, Noa has struggled with being this person, evident from her past failure and longing. However, her backstory is a point of contention for someone like Oshi, who isn't as much of a fan as Noa and her character. He states that he doesn't quite understand Noa, and he doesn't have much interest in her character either. Now, granted, he does state that Noa works as the trunk of the tree, which bears leaves, branches, and fruits that are the supporting cast. More often than not, Noa is usually the one who brings the best out of characters around her, whether it be Satoru, who slowly regains his love for labors after being betrayed by them, Kanaka and her loving for home and a grandmother, and even Asuma, who finds himself at odds with family. Of course, he also isn't a fan of Noa's petification of the Ingram, ironically restating Kanaka's explanation from This Is SV2, and despite knowing the context, he still isn't sold on Noa. He says, "I really don't care about her personal history." Ito tackled that theme, but in my opinion, he totally failed. Something like her past, the dog called Alphonse, the cat, and basketball. Traumatic memory doesn't contribute to characters. If you can't depict a character in the present, you can't in the flashback either. You need to show why she loves labor polishing in the present tense. Otherwise, she just becomes a cliche. The merit of the anime is that the audience enjoys cliches. They love repetition. Just like Oda's guns, predictable things satisfy the audience, but I didn't like it. I believe the director's job is to betray the audience's expectations and bring them to new fields. There is some merit to this, but in my opinion, this misrepresents the idea of the kind of character Noa is. Noa's backstory is extremely simple and straightforward, just like her character, but a backstory only serves to provide further clarity to a character rather than contribute to their depth. Noa is someone who is defined by their actions in the present, with their past providing context as to why they do the things they do. It's why someone like Goto, a character whose background is shrouded in mystery, is as interesting as he is. He admits he only sees Noa as a labor polishing girl, which does make me question how much he's invested time into looking into Noa's story. As stated before, Noa's story, and one of the greater things of Pat labor, is growing into adulthood. A coming-of-age story where Noa is at the crossroads of being a child and a responsible adult. If you're aware of Noa's behavior and background, you'd be aware that she can be a stickler for the law and the rules. She worked at a security company to fund her policing career, and she prioritizes being an upstanding policewoman. She strays from abusing her power and position and is shown to be against the exploitation of her profession. With this description, she sounds like a model police officer, especially since she was commended for excellent judgment during training. Though she is often weighed down and held back by a more childish nature, coddling the Ingram and being wary of it taking any damage. She likens the machine to her dog Alphonse because she still has yet to let go of her memory of him. At first, this isn't a problem, and sometimes it does help her resolve conflicts while taking negligible damage, yet her skill in the Ingram and her ability to perform duties as a police officer are called into question. The first time being either Kumagami or Kanaka, depending on if you're watching TV or reading the manga. Either or, these two women are the mentors or role models for Noa. They are essentially what Noa could be like in the future, and they both encourage Noa to achieve her true potential and have pride in her work. Noa is either apprehensive and or stumped at this revelation. The desire to pilot the Ingram is inherently one derived from childhood self-fulfillment. While she is a police officer and holds herself to that standard, being pilot of Ingram 1 was merely a personal goal, not necessarily done to fulfill the duties the average patrol leader pilot should. It affects her performance and decision making, hating when it gets dirty, not wanting other people to pilot it, and is apprehensive to the idea of using a different machine or outright replacing it altogether. But because of how advanced Ingram was and how quickly she was catching up to veteran pilots, this was no concern for her. If the Ingram was already on top of the world, what effort would you need to put into properly bettering your abilities? Don't get me wrong, Noa does seek to improve, but her view of the Ingram was prioritized over loosening her grip on the machine and what it means to her. Yet soon Noa would be forced to answer for this behavior and this mindset, one of the most important events in Pat labor. You already know what I'm getting at, so let's just cut to the chase, the Griffin arc. This arc and a sequence of events are crucial to Noa's character and serves as a turning point for her development. Before, she was able to get by with the help of her teammates and the power of the Ingram, but the Griffin serves as a foe she had to engage with closely and personally. The Phantom arc does pose a challenge to her in a similar fashion, nearly outright beating her at times. But on both occasions, those close to her were able to assist her. She had people to rely on, to fall back on. Though, when it comes to the Griffin, she was the last resort. She was the trump card. Even the Griffin's design philosophy was prioritizing close quarters combat over long distance flashy attacks and abilities that forced Noa to bring out the best of her abilities. The first encounter takes place at the Tokyo Labor Show in Harumi, and she feels responsible for the shooting of Kumagami, Asuma's injuries, and the perpetrator escaping. Oda would reassure her that none of that was her fault, but she still feels responsible. Then she'd come to learn that the labor she had fought had crashed into the Shiba Mountains, and while it remained a hollow victory for the team, she felt relieved. As far as she knew, the worst part of the nightmare had been over, and she'd be able to go back to her usual routine. Even then, this could not be further from the truth. Things failed to add up, and the police conclude the crash site was orchestrated to throw the police off. The thing was still out there, and with Oda's Unit 2 destroyed, Noa would have to be the one to confront it alone. She would even be given a powerful weapon known as a riot gun, a labor-sized shotgun to down her opponent, despite Noa having an apprehension to using firearms. Once she finally confronts her opponent, it's a standoff, the two waiting for each other to make the first move. The others urge her to take the first initiative, but she hesitates, the Griffin finally attacking first and Noa refusing to fire due to the people being at the scene of the battle. Left to defend, the team cleared the area to allow her to fire. Though again, she hesitates, this time a labor appearing behind the Griffin to place a bomb on it. She pulls the trigger, but it's too late. Griffin dodges, she hits the labor with a bomb, and a shockwave knocks both the pilots out. That's where we're finally introduced to Noa's basketball career that had been foreshadowed in the previous episodes. Her falling out of the sport due to her failure in the first game, remembering that she asked herself if she did her best. The same could be said for this battle, a real showdown that will determine Noa's future in her line of work. She successfully pushes back, but the battle becomes fierce and unending. You can feel the raw emotion coming from the girl. They trade blows until the sheet tightly holds onto its arm, the Griffin being forced to detach both of them and fly off, before crashing into the bay. This is an event that took place across the entire night, completely totaling the Ingram and doing critical damage to Noa's emotional state. And here she was at the end of her wits. This battle asks her a question. Does she have what it takes to handle this line of duty? Is she prepared to face the hardships that come with maintaining the peace? Can you handle the weight of being unable to do something, despite it already being beyond your ability? Her answer? No. This was a fight that was lost. A battle with no winners. Even her team was unable to celebrate despite the Griffin fleeing at the end. Her friends were there to help, but the battle was something she mostly fought alone. This event dealt a critical blow to Noa's mindset, and starts to plant thoughts into Noa's mind she'd be forced to confront. Even though this battle was lost, its outcome was all but guaranteed. Though soon after, Noa finally asked herself the question, do I really belong in this position? If I can't keep anyone safe and on both occasions I left my enemy escape, am I the right person for this job? Her flaws become more apparent, Oda being a far better shot than her. She assumed herself to be a natural marksman before, but it only reinforced the fact that she rarely used her revolver cannon. Everyone's strengths start appearing stronger to her, and this is where she decides that she must prove herself to the team. She still isn't ready to let go of her previous mindset just yet. However, she's ready to acknowledge that there's more for her to learn in this line of duty. No one is naturally perfect. She still has skills she must hone. More often, she seeks to take initiatives, whether it be investigating criminal activity on her own, or, for example, trying to stop the Griffin when it appears as they're already handling a heavy ordeal. Fuwa's eventual advances in getting her a career in the military would further make her question if her abilities would be better suited for a different position, but only for a moment. The Peacemaker's arrivals would also put pressure on her, a machine being able to do a job on its own that she already struggles with the combined efforts of the Ingram. The pressure makes her retreat back home, back to Alphonse's grave. A total relapse that her partner Asuma can only sympathize with as he arrives in the capital to bring her back. The final confrontation with the crab on High Lake being the proving grounds that Noa would finally assure herself with. The second Griffin encounter in the new files has Noa unflinchingly taking on her opponent. No more hesitation. No more assistance. This time she has an answer for the questions she had been asked all those months ago. Yes. Yes, I can. Akemi Takada was one of the headgear members that had a hard time wrapping her head around Noa. She states that when she was painting artwork of Noa staring out to the sea with a bandage on her face, insinuating that she had been injured and was lost in thought, she said it helped her understand Noa a bit more. In the anime and in the manga, there are either close calls to injuries on Noa's face or faint lacerations, the Griffin being what gives her these injuries. It wouldn't be too far-fetched to interpret this as Noa's turning point, of growing into adulthood, her innocence marred by a line of duty she chose. She wanted to run away, but she didn't. She lives with it. It's a reminder of the work she involved herself in, akin to Kumagami's scar from being shot. I can understand how seeing this makes Takada understand Noa more. I think the events of her policing duties opens her up to being someone on the level of lieutenants such as Kanaka or Kumagami. I think her entire arc would finally come around in Patlabor 2, a moment that left many confused with Noa's lack of enthusiasm towards piloting the Ingram and not wanting to be the girl who's labor crazy. At first, it may feel like an antithesis of her character, a Noa who isn't crazy over Unit 1. I'd say that this moment is perfect given the context of what Noa had already been through, but understandably confuses those unaware of her development. Many who engage with the Oshi-centric works will notice that Noa's characterization doesn't get much focus. Oshi choosing to just leave her alone and let her be as is because people will like her regardless. It is true to an extent, as she is a beloved character to those who don't engage with who she is beyond the surface level. This is further rectified by him legitimately making an attempt to add to her character in the movie with those lines, fans finding it confusing and a bit jarring. As stated before, it makes the most sense given the context of what came before. This is a Noa who answers to the call of duty. This is a Noa who comes to terms with her past and childish nature, without it affecting her ability to make the right decisions. Of course, this is big talk for someone who's like 22 years old, but still. In conclusion, Noa's character and story is one of growth, what it means to perform the duties with the powers you're given. Granted, it doesn't make her a complex character, she's still easy to understand and straightforward, but I'm sure that's the point. Noa is relatable, having a special interest in robots and machines, supposedly like those watching and reading Patlabor. She doesn't come from a family with a big company, nor is she wrapped up in any controversies or conspiracies, and her family life is perfectly stable. She's a normal girl who's experiencing the realities of society around her. I think Noa's character is easy to gloss over, and I think it's misguided to treat her as just an idea or a concept rather than a character. I'm not saying that I know more or know better than Mamoru Oshii, I just think that he gets good results when he tries to add to the story, just like I said with the Next Generation. But with that being said, I think that's a good place to stop. I made this video because I felt like an actual analysis on Noa's character is long overdue. To be honest, this isn't the first time I've delved into Noa, but this is probably the first video that does it on the website. There isn't a lot of video content online that actually talks about the setting of Patlabor rather than just its development of the characters and setting. But, you know, as they say, be the change you want to see in the world. Anyways, this has been Mecha. Like, subscribe, and I'll be seeing you.